Yeah, first observation I would make, there's been a lot of discussion, as you know, in a very partisan way about the effect of the 2017 tax bill. When we had an all-Republican government, we did a major rewrite of the tax code in 2017. Our prediction was that revenue from corporate tax reduction and individual tax reduction would produce a surge of revenue. That's exactly what's happened. By cutting those overall corporate rates and individual rates, we've produced a surge of new revenue for the federal government. Shifting to the issue of the week, we have, as you know, on the floor, a proposal on school safety and mental health. I support it. I hope we'll be able to move forward. Obviously, that'll be determined by the membership as to just how long we spend on the bill. But regardless, I hope we'll be able to pass it. I think it's a significant step in the right direction to deal with the two issues that I think it focuses on: school safety and mental health.
And just to follow up on what the leader said about the 2017 Tax Act, the increase in revenues is such that Democrats don't need to raise taxes. They don't need to raise them by $1 trillion or whatever it is they're talking about to fund more expansion of government. The federal government has more revenue today coming in as a percentage of GDP than it has at any time since the year 2000. And as the leader pointed out, income tax on the individual side, corporate side, capital gains taxes, revenues all up. And thanks in large part to the good work that was done in 2017 on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I just want to speak briefly about the President's current proposal, which is to suspend temporarily the gas tax. This is yet another example of this administration's failure on an issue that is fundamental to the American people, and that is the price they're paying for a gallon of gasoline. $5 is the national average right now. And what the administration, of course, is coming up with is yet another gimmick, another Band-Aid, and something they know is dead on arrival up here in Congress. The President knows it, Democrats know it up here, and I think from what we're told, they've conveyed that to him. So the question is, why do people at the White House continue to talk about ideas like these that are going nowhere? Why are they talking about tax rebates? Why are they talking about, trying to convince other countries around the world to up their energy production when we have ample energy supplies right here in the United States? Instead, we're going hat in hand to these other countries around the world. Why is he continuing to talk about a gas tax holiday and tax rebates and all these things that don't treat the fundamental problem? And that is that we have taken American energy producers out of the game. All this administration has to do is get these energy producers off the sidelines, back in the game, start increasing American energy production, American energy supplies. It'll start meeting demand, and gas prices will start coming down. That's the formula. The President and his policies have contributed to where we are today. It's as simple as that. And they can fix it, but they've got to start focusing on the real problem and not on gimmicks that they know are going nowhere.
Well, Joe Biden, the president of painfully high prices, is throwing another desperate Hail Mary pass. It's the so-called gas tax holiday. The holiday the American people need is a holiday from Joe Biden's terrible energy policies. So what is he proposing? He wants to eliminate 18 cents of federal taxes from each gallon of gasoline. Now, let me point out that since the day Joe Biden became president till today, gas prices are up over $2.50 a gallon, higher today than they were the day he took office. So what do the Democrats have to say about this so-called holiday? Well, Nancy Pelosi called it showbiz. Other Democrats have called it short-sighted, ineffective, and too little too late. Why are we in this position? Because Joe Biden continues to take the side of the radical, extreme environmentalists who want to strangle American energy. As a result, we have the highest gas prices in 40 years. We have inflation at a 40-year high. And we have a case where they've just had to raise federal borrowing rates by the highest amount in the last 35 years. So here we are, highest gas prices ever. And for most Americans, they would say it is the worst economy in their lifetimes. Consumer confidence is at an all-time low. 3 out of 4 Americans say the country is heading in the wrong direction. And it's because gas prices are so high. It's high energy costs. Joe Biden seems to finally realize that when energy prices go up, voters get angry, the poor gets hurt the most, and quality of life and the cost of living gets much, much worse. But apparently some of his advisors haven't heard that yet, because his climate advisor, John Kerry, said absolutely all the oil and gas needs to stay in the ground. His Secretary of Energy said she didn't care how high gas prices get, just go out and buy an electric car for $55,000. Well, the Secretary of Transportation actually took that advice, went and bought an electric car, one made in Mexico, and it was one of the 49,000 electric vehicles that was recently recalled because of faulty batteries. This is where we are today in this country. If Joe Biden is serious about getting energy costs under control, he needs to do the right thing, which is allow oil and gas exploration on federal lands, put out the permits so that we can do more energy infrastructure construction. It is time, Mr. President, to stop the gimmicks and unleash American energy.
So next week in Madrid will be probably the most important NATO meeting in decades. Had a chance to visit with the people from the government of Finland the other day who, after 70 years of being non-aligned, want to join NATO. When that happens, they'll have the longest border of any country with Russia. Sweden making the same decision. And NATO has to look at how we change to protect the new members of NATO. Talking to the defense minister at Latvia, he said, we don't want to be rescued by NATO. We want to be defended by NATO. We don't want NATO to come in 6 weeks after we've been overrun by the Russians and then take us back into a destroyed country. We want to be defended by NATO. What we do at this upcoming meeting will send a strong signal to Putin and others, and Putin cannot be allowed to win in Romania. We need to be sure that we continue to get the Ukrainians everything they need as soon as we can get it to them. That doesn't seem to be happening right now. And the tide of that battle is turning a little bit. We're not hearing the administration saying any longer the Ukrainians can win. We need to be sure that the Ukrainians not only can win, but they do win, and all of our NATO allies expect us to lead on this issue.
Today, our country is less safe than it was when Joe Biden took office. And we can take a look at his foreign policy, and we can focus in on his military policies as well, domestically. And what we have seen under President Biden is a move, a push to make our entire non-tactical vehicle fleet in the United States military electric, all electric, by the year 2030. The entire fleet. He has also made us more reliant upon our foreign adversaries for oil sourcing for the military. Sources like Iran and Russia. And we've also seen a diminished stockpile of critical minerals in this administration as well. So last week in the Senate Armed Services Committee, we had the opportunity to make some amendments that would correct these really bad policies. These are amendments that I pushed in front of the committee, and they were accepted in a bipartisan manner. One is to take a look at how we are sourcing those electric vehicles and to look at the policy, and if these electric vehicles have components that are being sourced through child or slave labor, not to accept them in the United States military. We all know that China controls the EV supply, so we should push back against that. Second, we need to make sure that we are developing up our national stockpile of critical minerals, understanding that President Biden pulled out of Afghanistan and left behind a bed of minerals with an estimated value of $3 trillion. Right now, the Chinese have around 60 contracts with the Taliban to go in and begin mining that bed of critical rare earth minerals. And then, of course, our DoD energy policy. Again, doing a study and understanding where our oil supplies are coming from, understanding that, just for example, in the Indo-PACOM, most of the crude that is fueling our ships and vehicles in that region, that fuel source is coming from Iran and from Russia. These are things that we need to correct to make sure that the United States of America is the strongest and most prosperous nation and military in the world.
Joe Biden and the Democrats have a war against work. They want to take good, hardworking Americans and make them dependent on government. They want Americans to spend more time looking at whether there's a new government program rather than focus on finding a new job. There's virtue in having a job. I grew up in a poor family. We lived in public housing. My mom told me, you're going to work, and there's virtue in work. So I put out a bill, so Let's Get to Work Act, and it's real simple. We've got to get able-bodied Americans back to work. When the pandemic started, under the SNAP program, work requirements were waived. We ought to come back and apply those work requirements. And we ought to apply those same work requirements to public housing. Able-bodied Americans ought to be part of the capitalist system, be part of having skin in the game, pay the taxes. When you have a job, you pay income taxes and payroll taxes, and you buy things, you pay sales tax, and you buy a house, you pay property taxes. We've got to get this country back to work.
The January 6th committee revealed that a member of your conference, Ron Johnson, his top aide, reached out to Mike Pence on the morning of January 6th to make an offer of fake electors on that day. Have you spoken to Senator Johnson about this, and do you have any concerns about this revelation?
I think you ought to ask Senator Johnson about that. I've been focusing on what we do here in the Senate.
Switching to Iran, the Wall Street Journal just published a report about how the Iranian regime has been able to launder tens of billions of dollars of money through Western, Turkish, Emirati, and Chinese banks. If, in fact, Iran is able to launder its money and get its revenue through these banks, how do you think that would affect the talks between Iran and the world powers? Why do Iran need to sign under an agreement that they already can get some of the revenue from at higher cost?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all that. I can tell you I think we're headed toward a very bad deal with the Iranians, which I hope the administration in the end does not enter into.
Leader McConnell,
Yeah.
You have an A+ rating from the NRA, yet they oppose this gun safety legislation. Are you worried at all about maybe losing that A+ rating with the NRA?
What I'm mainly concerned about is dealing with the issues that have been brought to the fore by these mass shootings, which are directly related to school safety and mental health. And I think Senator Cornyn and his team have put together a bill that addresses the problem.
Leader McConnell. Do you condemn Eric Greitens' rhino hunting video from over the weekend, and will you support him if he's the Republican Senate nominee in Missouri?
Well, I think this is something that voters in the Missouri Republican primary need to take a look at.
What's your opinion of the video?
Yeah.
What do you think it says about the Republican conference that 3/4 of its members are poised to vote against this bipartisan Safer Communities Act?
What does it say about what?
The Republican Party that 3/4 of your members are poised to vote against this act.
Well, I think it says that different members have different points of view. We see that frequently. We had members voting on both sides, for example, the infrastructure bill, both sides of the postal reform bill, both sides of USICA when it passed the Senate. It's not at all unusual.